Welcome to Module 6, Chapter 6, Strengthening a Company's Competitive Position and Learning to Soar. Just a reminder that your strategic application mini case study, which is assignment number 2, the written paper is due on Sunday by 9 p.m. to submit through the assignment button by your team leader and to also post the PowerPoint presentation in the appropriate discussion board form, and presentations will be taking place next week during Module 7. This week's topic is about strengthening a company's competitive position. Chapter 6 discusses that once a company has settled on which of the 5 generic strategies to employ, attention must now turn to what other strategic actions can be taken in order to implement the choice of the basic competitive strategy. There's typically 3 dimensions. There's the offensive and defensive competitive actions. Second, there's the competitive dynamics and the timing of the strategic movers, the first movers or the late movers. And then there's the breadth of the company's activities through its scale of operation. These are explored through 7 broad categories in Chapter 6. First is whether and when to go on to the offensive. Number 2, whether and when to employ defensive strategies. Number 3, when to undertake strategic moves. Fourth, whether to merge or acquire another firm. Fifth, whether to integrate the value chain where you integrate backward or forward. Number 6, whether to outsource certain value chain activities and whether to enter into strategic alliances such as partnerships or formal joint ventures. So the first one is launching strategic offenses to improve a company's market position, regardless of any of the 5 generic competitive strategies that we learned about in Chapter 5. The firm is pursuing these strategies, and there are times when they must go on the offensive. And the best offensive moves tend to incorporate several key principles. The first principle is should you focus relentlessly on building a competitive advantage and then striving to convert it into a sustainable advantage for your organization. The second is applying resources where rivals are least able to defend themselves. Number 3 is employing the element of surprise as opposed to doing what rivals expect and they're prepared for your organization to do. And the fourth one is to really display what I would like to call a strong strategic bias for swift, decisive, and overwhelming actions to overpower your competitions and best serve your customers. So offensive strategies, as a general rule, should be based on exploiting the company's greatest, strongest strategic assets. And Chapter 6 offers several options of how to compete on the offensive. The special issue or the special topic in Chapter 6 is they talk about blue ocean strategy. And they only give a less than a half a page to a page to talk about blue ocean strategy. But basically, a blue ocean strategy seeks to gain a very dramatic and durable competitive advantage by not so much focusing on beating out the competition, but on the offensive, creating a new service, a new industry, or maybe a new or a very distinctive market segment that the customers haven't even thought about it. And if you do a blue ocean strategy, the competitors are irrelevant and it allows a company to really create and capture new demand. So think of it of going out into the blue ocean where no one is swimming versus the concept of the red ocean where, if you look at the automotive industry, it's a red ocean. There's a lot of people competing. But a blue ocean would probably have been the first organization that came out with the hybrid car or the electric car, but it's now becoming a red ocean because lots of the competitors are now having electric cars. So what is that next blue ocean strategy that you could create? I would recommend that you can either search the internet on blue ocean strategy. It's a great book. It has an audio tape, and you can learn more about this offensive strategy. So the second thing as to strengthen your company's competitive position would be a defensive strategy. Defensive strategies are protecting the market position and your current competitive advantage. And if you think about it this way, if there are organizations going on the offensive, you're going to have a defensive strategy to counter the offensive strategy of some of your competing firms. So the textbook will talk about the defensive strategies available. How do you block avenues open to your rivals? How do you get engaged to go head to head with your rivals? And then the next thing you need to think about is the timing of an offensive or a defensive strategic move. Should you be the first mover or the second mover or the late mover? The first mover can provide great advantages. However, first movers typically bear greater risk and developmental costs than firms that move later. And there's several conditions that exist to make sure you have the capabilities and the capacities to be a first mover that your textbook will talk about. And then, of course, there's times when you have to be the late mover because you don't have the resources and the capabilities to invest to be that first mover. So the ultimate question of timing of whether you're an offensive or defensive strategic move is to be a first mover or to not be a first mover. And the chapter lists a lot of questions and considerations for you to consider for your organization. One of our discussion boards this week, which is assigned, is on Amazon.com. So your initial posting for discussion board 10 is based on the illustration capsule 6.3, Amazon.com. You want to talk about Amazon.com and what you think of their first mover advantages did the president have? Were there some disadvantages? Why was the learning curve so steep for Amazon when they broke into and when they created the online market? And then for fun, if you use Amazon.com, what do you like best about it and where can they still find ways to better serve its customers? So after thinking about the timing, the next thing available to you is you can strengthen a company's competitive position via its scope of operations. So this really requires competitive moves and timings that you can consider your company's operations, the things that you can control within your boundaries, and should you be venturing, creating strategic alliances, mergers, or acquisitions with other organizations. So the scope of the firm or the scope of operation refers to the range of activities which the firm performs internally, the breadth of the products and service offerings, the extent of the geographic market presence. It's a mix of your business portfolios and how you handle the scale and the scope of your operations. So there's several choices. The first one is horizontal mergers and acquisition strategies. In the horizontal scope is the range of products and service segment that a firm serves within its key markets. And a horizontal scope can be further created through mergers and acquisitions. And the merger is when you're combining two or more companies into a single corporate entity with a newly created company often taking on a new name. But an acquisition is a combination in which one company, company A, acquires company B and absorbs the operations of company B, the acquired, and most likely still carries on its existing name. So these are the two ways that a horizontal strategy can be implemented. The other one is the vertical scope. And vertical is the extent to which a firm's internal activities encompass maybe one, several, or all of the activities that make up the industry's entire value chain system. So when you integrate, you can integrate fully or partially. So those are the two typical vertical integrations. And then in your textbooks, it'll talk about the advantages of vertical integration strategies. And I believe that the two best reasons for investing in the company's resources in vertical integration are to really, once again, strengthen the competitive position and boost your profitability by possibly gaining more market share and or controlling cost, or it could be both. So look at that a well vertically integrated firm is one that performs the value chain activities along more than one stage of an industry's value chain systems. So you can integrate backwards to achieve greater competitiveness, and backwards integration can be very viable, a very profitable strategy, and usually backwards integration involves performing industry value chain activities previous performed by a supplier or another organization engaged in the early stages of the industry's value chain, so that you're looking to backwards integration so that you can purchase certain suppliers. Now there's forward integration, which involves performing industry value chain activities closer to the end user. These are the activities that are moving forward so that you can increase efficiency and bargaining power with it could be retail outlets. You could want to get direct hold of your customers through the internet. So you got to make a choice. Do you go backwards? Do you go forward? Or do you do a combination of both? The next scope of operations to strengthen a company's competitive advantage which an organization can consider is outsourcing. And outsourcing involves the farming out of certain value chain activities to outside vendors. And your textbook will talk about the main activities involved in outsourcing and the advantages and the risk of outsourcing along the value chain activities. The next one is strategic alliances and partnerships. And a strategic alliance is a formal agreement between two or more separate companies in which they agree to work cooperatively or collaboratively towards some common objective. Now, a form of a strategic alliance could be very formal, such as a joint venture in which the partners not only agree to work together, but they set up an independent corporate entity that they own and control jointly, sharing in its revenues and expenses. So your book will talk about the strategic alliance as a formal agreement, a partnership, or a strategic alliance more formal as setting up a joint venture. As all the other strategic moves you have here, a strategic alliance has benefits, it has drawbacks, but I can tell you that the success of any alliance depends on how well the partners work together, their capacity and capabilities to respond and adapt to changing internal and external conditions, which were talked about in chapters 3 and 4, and their willingness to renegotiate the agreement if circumstances so warrant and things have to change. So you also have to be very agile and flexible in creating strategic alliances. But here's the good news. A strategic alliance, whether through a partnership or a joint venture, they are successful if you create a system for managing their alliances. So you really want to have a strategy, a proactive strategy in working with your alliance. You want to be able to consistently and constantly build relationships with your partners and establish trust. And above all else, you want to best service your competitions. So you've got to realize that strategic alliances is a capability that has to be developed in the organization, and it's also developed over time to be another source of a competitive advantage. The next this week's topic in strengthening a competitive advantage is a framework called SOAR. Earlier in the term, I asked you if you wanted a copy of the Thin Book of SOAR that was co-authored by my colleague Jenna Hendricks, who worked with John Deere. And SOAR is some research that came out of my dissertation that it's a profoundly positive approach to strategic thinking, planning, and leading that allows an organization to pull in its whole system to construct its future and co-create strategy through collaboration, shared understanding. So it's real-time strategic change. Now, if you don't have the Thin Book of SOAR to read for this week, in the module folder is a couple of articles on SOAR, a couple of book chapters. You only have to read one of them, because what I want you to get a grasp of is that SOAR is a very dynamic framework that has a whole systems thinking, leading, and planning approach. That strategy is everybody's job. So when you look at the SOAR framework, where this builds into crafting and executing strategy, is when you want to involve more than the senior leadership and the board. So the articles or the thin book, whichever you decide to read this week, will give you a highlight overview of what is SOAR, how it emerged, its theory base, and everybody likes to compare SOAR to SWOT. And the importance to know here is SOAR leveraged the strengths and the opportunities of the SWOT analysis, and then framed the importance of talking about the organization and its stakeholders' aspirations, the things that it wishes to achieve, the wishes of its customer base, and how do you create strategy with measurable results. Finally, who is using SOAR? It's used all over the world through any of the resources you read. This slide here shows that it's used in many sectors throughout the world, and a list of organizations that I've currently worked with to apply the SOAR framework. And there's a website if you want to learn about SOAR strategy. So kind of the two new concepts introduced in this chapter, where I encourage you to look beyond the textbook, is the blue ocean strategy and the SOAR framework. So what are your next steps in Module 6? You want to read Chapter 6 and either the thin book of SOAR or one of the articles or book chapters on SOAR posted in this week's module, and use the supporting PowerPoints. I'd like you to answer discussion board questions 10 and 11. And as I mentioned, discussion board 10 is taken straight from your textbook, the illustration capsule 6.3 amazon.com, and there's several questions I want you to reflect on and answer in the discussion board. And then after reading the either the thin book of SOAR or one of its articles and book chapters, I'd like you to give your insight into how do you think SOAR can help a company really build its competitive advantage, and how might you be able to do maybe a quick SOAR in your work, either at the level of a project that you're in charge of, or could be as high as a division or the organization that you work for. And then finally, just a reminder that your strategic application is due. Your mini case study assignment number 2 is to be submitted by Sunday through the student assignment section on Blackboard, and the case study by Sunday night is to be posted by your team leader in the discussion board forum. So team leaders, please make sure I get the paper by Sunday by 9 p.m. and also make sure the PowerPoint presentation is posted. Thank you and have a great week. Welcome back again. I realized that I forgot to give you next week's scenes. So as you know, next week there's going to be no recorded lecture. Next week is your first time where we meet in Blackboard Collaborative, our Blackboard Collaborate. It used to be WIMBA for those of you who are new to Blackboard this term. So your assignment has been submitted on Sunday. Your presentation was posted in the Blackboard discussion forum. So on the evening of your presentation, you want to be ready 15 minutes ahead of time. I will already have for that evening all 3 presentations uploaded in Blackboard Collaborative. So you're required to be there for your team's presentation, and you will present at the start time that you signed up for. And other students have the option to come live with us and listen to your presentations and engage in a Q&A. Or other students can preview 2 other presentations after they've been recorded that week and complete the peer review and submit in the discussion board number 12. So think about it like this. If you were coming to class on ground, and we had a Monday night class together for 3 hours, you would hear all 5 teams present their case study. You'd be in class for 3 hours. What you're required to do in the online course is to be there for your 20 to 30 minute presentation. and then you have the option to attend 2 more presentations live that week or that same night that you're presenting. Or you can go back and preview only 2 presentations and complete a peer review and submit it in the discussion board 12 form. If you show up live, I'll keep track that you attended 2 live presentations. You will have either commented while the students were presenting and asking them any questions or making a comment, so that's your credit, that's your discussion board credit that night. So you don't have to submit anything. You just need to show up and engage and watch 2 other presentations. And for all the teams and all the students in the class, I do like you to take the time to go back and review any postings for those who have watched your presentation. Maybe they had feedback about the quality of your presentation or the slides of your presentation or the content. You don't have to engage in a dialogue, but this just gives you an opportunity to look at peer-reviewed comments of the first set of presentations. So you're not required to come to all of the presentations. I will be at all the presentations, and you're more than welcome to be at all the presentations. You're not required to watch all the presentations. You only have to watch 2 of them because we will be taping um, all of these. And then the other discussion board for next week would be to select your strategic capstone project assignment essay strategic assignment 4. So when you're in that form, you just in the subject line want to have the case study that your team selected, and there's over 31 cases in this book. However, cases 23, 24, 29, and 31 aren't really conducive to do an entire capstone project. But there's great cases there, so when you go in, if you pick the Lululemon Athletica Corporation case study, and that shows in the subject box, please realize that the rest of the teams cannot pick that case study. That's why you'll want to work with your team outside of Blackboard and come up with a first, second, third choice. If you're the first to post in the discussion board, you're going to get the first choice for your case study. If you're the second to post, you've got to look at what the first to post did, and you just can't duplicate. There'll be 1 team per case study. So there's lots of great choices in the textbook, and I look forward to hearing from you and reading your postings.